Before the ominous gates of the Demon Lord's castle, a young man named Jin turned to his three companions. Sensing the tension, he asked what was wrong, wondering if it was about their strategy for the final battle. His companions, however, remained silent, their faces cast in shadow and their expressions grim and unreadable. The silence was broken by their leader, the hero Reki. With a cold authority, she declared that in her name, she was kicking him out of the party. Jin's face contorted in disbelief and shock. As his mind reeled, Jin Geist recalled his journey. He had left his small village with his childhood friend, Reki, who received the goddess's blessing as the hero. Along the way, they were joined by Yuri the saint and Reki the sage. Together, they fought the Demon Lord's armies until this very day. He looked at Reki, asking if she remembered their promise. He remembered it all too well. When they first set out, they had made a pact with a priest. If he ever became a hindrance, he would leave the party. He confirmed that he understood, realizing with a heavy heart that this day was always meant to come. She saw the understanding in his eyes. A faint, almost relieved smile touched her lips as she acknowledged his acceptance, murmuring that it was good. The reason for this painful moment was clear. Jin possessed the early bloomer blessing, granting fast growth but little potential. In contrast, his companions were the hero with overwhelming physical abilities, the saint, who granted holy blessings, and the sage, who wielded lost arts. Though his contributions were significant at first, the gap between them never closed, and in the more intense battles, he had become a burden. Despite this, his other companions offered words of comfort. Reki assured him he was the best companion and that would never change. Yuri, with tears in her eyes, promised they would carry on his feelings. Jin could only thank them both. The others fell silent, leaving only him and Reki. They stood apart for a moment, the air heavy as they quietly exchanged each other's names. He broke the heavy silence, patting her head gently. He told her not to worry, certain she could defeat the Demon Lord. He promised to wait, and that once the battle was won, he would come and get her right away. Reki, however, quietly admitted she wasn't worried about that, her gaze distant and troubled. As Jin turned to leave, announcing his intention to pack his things, Reki and Yuri could only watch in silence, their faces etched with concern. He walked away from them, his mind already racing. He reasoned that once they defeated the Demon Lord, they would ascend to the status of heroes, making it nearly impossible for him to even have a conversation with them. Reki's words, he concluded, would likely not come to pass. Despite this grim outlook, he couldn't deny the truth of his feelings. He had been happy, truly happy, traveling with everyone. He turned back to face them one last time, a fragile smile cracking across his face as he offered his thanks. He confessed his honest desire to have fought alongside them until the very end. The three women could only stare back, their expressions a mixture of shock and sorrow. Later that night, the weight of the evening's events hung heavy in the air. Yuri suggested they should probably go to bed, and Reki agreed. Reki, however, decided she needed some fresh air first. But instead of going outside, she retreated to her room. Alone, she sat on her bed, her hand clenching into a tight fist. A fierce determination burned in her eyes as she resolved to defeat the Demon Lord as quickly as possible. Her reason was singular and urgent, so she could finally go buy a wedding dress. Her mind flooded with visions of the future she so desperately wanted. She pictured herself in a wedding gown, imagining every detail of a wedding arranged perfectly to Jin's tastes. More than anything, she longed to go out into town with him again, just the two of them. She reflected sadly that since the others joined, their time alone together had become scarce. Her thoughts drifted back to a pivotal memory from their past. She remembered Jin's unwavering declaration that he would always be on her side, regardless of what anyone else said. He had called her his precious family, a sentiment that resonated deeply within her. He had been grateful then, acknowledging that even when he couldn't control the power of his blessing, she had never failed to show kindness to him. A misfit. Building on his heartfelt words, she had posed a question of her own, asking if he would marry her after she defeated the Demon Lord, assuming he still liked her by then. Her question was met with a gentle laugh from him. His laughter subsided into a warm smile as he gave his unequivocal answer. He definitely would. And so, under the shade of the tree, a promise was made between them. She lay in bed, clutching her hands as she recalled their promise. Jin remembered it too, the precious memories they'd shared since they were 5. This, she affirmed to herself, was the entire reason she had been fighting all this time. Her conviction sharpened. With her current strength, they could likely defeat the Demon Lord in a single day. But if something were to happen to Jin, it would be a disaster. To prevent that, she had to make him leave the party, just for a little while. She then settled into her pillow, a soft smile on her face as she closed her eyes and whispered into the quiet room. "Good night, Jin." As she drifted into sleep, a final, heartfelt thought escaped her lips. "I love you." The door to the room clicked shut, leaving the space in silence. Elsewhere, Yuri stood outside a steamy bathroom. She felt bad for Jin, but reasoned that the party's fighting power wouldn't change much without him. In fact, he could have become a weakness. Inside, Reki bathed, lost in her own thoughts, wondering why Jin was so cute, and certain he was thinking about her too. Her thoughts darkened. She could see right through Reki's childish plan. Defeat the Demon Lord tomorrow, then confess to Jin. But Yuri couldn't give up on this. It was the first time, The first time anyone had understood her pain, the suffering she'd endured as a saint since childhood, offering prayers no one truly comprehended. The scene shifts to a grand hall where Jin sits before Yuri. He asks her to tell him a story, anything, whether happy or sad. He then looks up at her, his voice earnest, and asks why she would go to such lengths for him. He continues, his voice filled with emotion, explaining that while her prayers save everyone else, she has no one to turn to for herself. He declares that this is wrong. From beneath her veil, Yuri quietly wonders if such a thing is even permitted. He reaches out, gently taking her hand. He tells her it doesn't matter whether it's permitted or not. He doesn't want to help the saint. He wants to help Yuri. With fierce resolve, he vows that if anyone tries to stop him, he will punch them. Overwhelmed by his heartfelt promise, Yuri could only stare, tears welling in her eyes. A wave of emotion crashed over her, leaving her utterly speechless as his words echoed in her mind. Meanwhile, Reki reflected on the same event. She thought of Jin's kindness, how his passionate eyes could melt even her frozen heart. She recalled his exact words, his fervent desire to support Yuri. At that moment, she had cried, unable to respond. But now, she felt a new resolve hardening within her. The perfect time had finally arrived. In her bath, Reki Arias reflects on the lonely look Jin had when he left the room. She wonders if he was heartbroken, thinking he had been rejected, and resolves not to worry him. Her resolve hardens into a fiery determination. She declares that she will use everything she possesses as the saint to heal him now. Dismissing the importance of her virginity, she proclaims she would even quit being a saint, believing this course of action is for both of their sakes. As she considers this, her thoughts drift to the future after the demon lord's defeat. The party would disband, and their different social standings would make it difficult to meet. However, she reasons, if Jin were the saint's husband, the country couldn't treat him poorly, and it would be easier for everyone to see him. Elsewhere, Yuri, convinced she has the perfect plan, bursts into Jin's room, announcing her arrival. She finds the room completely empty. The bed is made, and a quiet stillness hangs in the air. Her eyes land on a note left on a small table. Calling out Jin's name in confusion, she picks it up, her expression shifting to one of utter shock as she reads it. Her shock quickly curdles into rage. Crumpling the note in her fist, she seethes, blaming that old elf for this. Far away, in a quiet village, Jin thanks Ryashika for bringing him all this way. The sage dismisses his gratitude, remarking that teleportation magic is mere child's play for her as a magical circle fades at their feet. He questions her, recalling that she once called it a secret art only sages could use. Ryashika explains that she doesn't mind using it for a friend and admits she was also interested in seeing his hometown. She asks if he will show her around, and he happily agrees. A look of genuine relief crosses his face. He confesses that he was grateful Ryashika brought him, as he honestly didn't know what face to show to everyone else back at the inn. Ryashika smiles gently, assuring him that wanting to deepen bonds with companions is not a bad thing. Jin reaffirms his indebtedness to her, but she simply reminds him that he just needs to return by the next morning. She feels a surge of nervousness, thinking to herself that the time is almost here. Jin turns to her, offering what little hospitality he can and inviting her inside. He confesses that he had been feeling down, but her presence has made him genuinely happy. His words prompt a flood of memories. She reflects on her long life as an elf, now 28XX years old, an age where her peers had long since started families. Lost in her research, she never considered marriage, and before she knew it, she had firmly settled into spinsterhood. As they stand before his home, the thought, "I'm home," echoes, though it is his, not hers. She remembers crying to her parents, but it was already too late. No man seemed to want a woman like her. She wondered if it was because of her status as a sage that she was avoided. In the end, unable to even secure a marriage meeting, she took the opportunity to join the hero on her quest. Her thoughts turn to Jin, who was so different from other men. She recalls a time when she tried to make a joke about her spinsterhood, but he didn't laugh. Instead, he had looked at her earnestly and said he thought she was considerate and wonderful, certain she would make a great wife. He had even declared that if she were truly hopeless, he would take her himself, admitting he would easily fall in love with someone like her. The memory causes a deep blush to spread across her face. In the present, Jin simply asks, "Is that so?" while taking a bite of food. He continues his praise, adding that she's also incredibly reliable and thanking her for all her help. The compliments overwhelm Ryashika, who covers her mouth in a fluster as her affection for him skyrockets. He then thoughtfully touches his chin, musing aloud that his preferred type might just be older women. His casual remark sends another jolt through Ryashika, her blush deepening. As she watches him from behind, a determined thought solidifies in her mind. It is almost time. Soon, she resolves, this strong yet gentle boy will be hers. They arrive at the front of a modest house. "This is my house," Jin announces, his expression turning hesitant as he clenches his fist. Sensing his apprehension, she places a reassuring hand on his shoulder. She reminds him that he has saved people and has every right to walk through that door with his head held high. Bolstered by her words, he thanks her, affirms his resolve, and raises his hand to knock firmly on the door. The door creaks open to reveal a weary-looking man who asks who is there. His eyes then fall upon the visitor, and his expression shifts to one of shock as he recognizes him. Jin, with a gentle smile, Jin announces his return to his father. His father's voice booms through the house, calling for his wife and announcing their son's return. A woman in an apron, Jin's mother, appears and welcomes him home, just as his father asks who the lady accompanying him is. Jin begins to introduce her. Before he can finish, however, Ryoshika steps forward with a polite smile, introducing herself directly to his parents as Jin's fiancée. The sudden announcement sends a shockwave through the room. His parents cry out in disbelief, while Jin himself is left utterly speechless. A short while later, seated around a table, the initial shock has transformed into overwhelming joy. Jin's father questions if he is dreaming, while his mother remarks on how lucky Jin is to have found such a beautiful woman, concluding that Ryoshika must truly love him. Amidst his parents' celebration, Jin is in a state of panic. He tries to interject, shouting for Ryoshika to wait and insisting they need to discuss their future. She calmly places a hand on his head, telling him to listen without being surprised. She then leans in close and confesses directly, "I like you." Flustered, Jin protests that she never gave any indication of such feelings, but she firmly grasps his hand, her gaze intense. She reminds him of a promise he made. She recalls asking him before what he would do if she couldn't find a husband, and he had responded that he would be happy to take her. The memory brings a deep blush to Jin's face. Desperate, Jin brings up their duty, questioning what will happen with the Demon Lord without the sage. Ryoshika casually replies that she will go right after spending one night with him. Overhearing this, his parents are ecstatic at the implication. Her resolve is unwavering. She looks at him with complete sincerity and declares that she is serious. She truly likes him and believes he is the only one for her. While the thought of suddenly becoming husband and wife still startles Jin, a new idea begins to form in his mind. Perhaps it isn't such a bad idea after all. He stands across from Ryoshika, her words hanging in the air between them. She implores him to think carefully, her expression earnest as she asks if any other woman would ever agree to marry him in the future. His parents observe the exchange, his father audibly musing on the rare opportunity to marry such a wonderful woman, one with style, good equipment, and a calm demeanor. Overwhelmed, Jin takes Ryoshika's hand, deciding they should step outside for a moment. He pulls her away with a sudden burst of speed, startling her completely. She cries out his name in shock as he drags her out of the house. Outside, under the light of the moon, he presses her against a wooden post, his expression serious. He asks her directly if she is truly serious about all of this. Flustered but firm, Ryoshika declares that of course she is. His intensity softens, a faint blush on his cheeks. He looks her in the eye and confesses that while he can't confidently say he loves her right now, she is a precious companion to him. Her eyes glisten as she takes in his words. He continues, stating his resolve. From now on, he wants to see her as a woman. Overcome with emotion, Ryoshika touches his hand, her voice trembling. She asks what he is saying, questioning if someone like him is truly okay for her. His gaze remains steady. With her eyes closed in serene happiness, Ryoshika whispers her own truth. Jin is who she wants. The space between them vanishes as they lean in, inches from a kiss. In the charged silence, she breathes his name, but the moment is shattered by a violent impact. Reki, the hero, slams into Jin, sending him flying. "I won't let you," she screams. Both Yuri and Ryoshika cry out in horror at the sudden, brutal attack. Her sudden assault left Jin crumpled on the ground, coughing. Ryoshika and Yuri rushed to his side in a panic, Ryoshika asking if he was okay while Yuri pleaded for him not to die. He struggled to process the attack, his mind reeling. A single, bitter thought surfaced as he glared into the darkness. Who on earth had done this to him? It was them. They had all done this. As his consciousness wavered, a dispute broke out over his treatment. Yuri stepped forward, ordering Ryoshika and Reki to move aside. She declared that she would handle the healing, reminding them that magic of the same type would cancel each other out. Ryoshika, suspicious, questioned the saint's true motives. Internally, Yuri's thoughts revealed a less than pure intention. She imagined receiving a great deal of praise after healing Jin. The argument intensified. Yuri dismissively told the pink saint to get out of the way, insisting she would handle everything. Ryoshika shot back, pointing out that physical contact wasn't necessary for healing magic. They both demanded the other move. Lying helpless, Jin had a fleeting thought that he was truly blessed to have companions who cared so deeply. His train of thought was derailed when Ryoshika leaned close, declaring her intention to perform mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, a method Jin immediately recognized as entirely irrelevant. The bickering was cut short as they all looked down at him, their faces a mixture of panic and concern. Their voices called out his name, pleading for him to wake up, to not die. But their pleas were unheard. Jin's consciousness was already fading into darkness. Jin Geist stirs in his sleep, groaning softly. He is in a bed, seemingly safe after the recent turmoil. The chronicle confirms, Jin Geist survives. His eyes open to a familiar wooden ceiling with exposed beams. He recognizes it as his own room, a place he thought he'd left behind. A new chapter begins, with all the members having come along. As he tries to sit up, a profound heaviness weighs down his body. He questions the strange lethargy, his brow furrowed in confusion. He throws back the covers with a start, only to find Yuri, the saint, sleeping soundly beside him. His mind reels with shocking confusion at her unexpected presence. He tries to wake her, his voice a panicked whisper. His memory flashes back to the previous day, Ryushika's confession to Reki, Reki's sudden appearance, and then nothing. He must have fainted. But that doesn't explain why Yuri is in his bed, or why they are in such a compromising position. His frantic attempts to rouse her finally work. Yuri begins to stir, murmuring his name sleepily as she rises. He shouts for her to please wake up, his face a mask of desperation. In the background, Reki stretches languidly. But Jin's attention is fixed on Yuri, who now kneels before him with a gentle smile, wishing him a good morning and asking how he feels. He quickly reassures her that he's fine now, thanking her for treating him. She expresses her relief that he is well. With a serene smile, she asks about his plans for the day, noting that it is the day of the demon lord's subjugation and that she will pray for everyone's safety. Her words trigger a sudden, jarring realization in Jin. He grabs her by the shoulders, his voice rising in alarm. He demands to know why she is in a place like this, reminding her that this is an important battle for peace and questioning what they are supposed to do without the hero's party. Yuri's composure falters. She looks away, flustered, and begins to explain, her words trailing off as she mentions something about the previous night at the demon lord's castle. The story of that day began with the final confrontation. The great demon lord who ruled over all demons, Kaiser Raluel, had faced them, acknowledging the hero of the current generation. The hero, Reki, met his challenge with cold resolve. She offered him a choice, die now or die later. If he proved to be troublesome, she warned, she would face him with her full power. She unleashed her divine blade of judgment, a devastating attack that struck the demon lord down. As the blow landed, Reki mused that in the end, it is the power of love that always wins. The battle was over. The demon lord questioned which side was truly right in the war, but the party declared that the humans were correct and victorious. With the purification working, he was now bound to serve humanity. He collapsed, accepting his condition as the defeated party. Seeing this, Reki decided there were no further problems and urged her companions to hurry back. Later, after the demon lord had fainted, the sage, Lusika, expressed her shock that the fight ended in a single hit. Reki, however, seemed unimpressed, stating she could have done it alone and almost felt sorry for him. She nervously brought up their next task, reporting their victory to the king. But she quickly admitted there was a more pressing matter. When she woke up, Jin was gone. Reki cut her off, exclaiming that she had left the report to Lusika. She argued that the hero obviously had to be present for the subjugation ceremony, implying she hadn't made it in time. She became agitated, insisting she didn't want Jin to be alone with anyone and that subjugating the demon lord was her duty. Yuri calmly interjected, agreeing with Lusika and suggesting that the king, who knows Reki, should accompany them for support. Yuri offered to take care of Jin, but Reki shouted at her not to talk with her chest. Lusika demanded she stop the baseless insults, complaining about women whose nutrition only goes to one part. To settle the dispute, Reki declared they would decide with a game of rock, paper, scissors. She leans in close to Jin, asking if she has ever lied to him. As he sits on the bed, still trying to process the news of the demon lord's defeat, she confirms that the world is now at peace. Jin lowers his gaze, taking in the gravity of her words. His thoughts turned inward. With their journey now truly over, he concluded that there was no longer any reason for him to remain with the party. He voiced this intention to return to his life as a villager. But Reki, now sitting beside him, gently placed her hands on his shoulders. She suggested that the saint shouldn't rejoin the hero party either, reassuring him that she felt no pain and he needn't worry about her. Jin could only sigh in mild frustration. His self-deprecation was met with a firm but gentle correction from Reki. She insisted he stop referring to himself as someone like me, explaining that it's painful for those who care about him to hear him speak so poorly of himself. She punctuated her point with a knowing, warm smile. As he started to object, she gently placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. She made him promise not to speak that way again. He relented, a slight sweat beading on his brow as he agreed. He promised he wouldn't put himself down anymore. Pleased with his answer, she declared it a promise. A moment of clarity then struck Jin, and holding her hand, he finally asked why she was in his bed to begin with. Reki, suddenly flustered, sheepishly admitted to having ulterior motives and begged his forgiveness. Later, after getting dressed, Jin entered the main room of his home. Finding it empty, he called out for his parents, but there was no reply. His question was answered by a note left on the dining table next to a prepared breakfast. It explained that his parents would be out until the evening, but had left food for him. A postscript wished him good luck. The meaning of the note and his parents' absence crashed down on him with sudden panic. He realized he was alone in the house with Reki. His mind raced, wondering what the others were discussing and terrified at the thought of the saint witnessing his current predicament. He reacts to Reki's question with a panicked burst of magic, shredding the note from his parents with a windblade spell. As the paper scraps flutter to the ground, he frantically insists to a confused Reki that he used magic for no reason at all. Sometime later, Yuri finds Reki sitting contentedly among flowers. Yuri remarks that Reki has changed her clothes and that they look good on her. With a soft, happy blush, Reki simply confirms that she is very happy. Elsewhere, Jin is momentarily lost in thought, admitting to himself that Reki's nightgown had been quite stimulating. Yuri interrupts his reverie, suggesting they eat the breakfast his mother prepared out on the terrace since the weather is so nice. He readily agrees. As they eat, he enthusiastically praises his mother's cooking, remarking on how fresh the vegetables are. Across the table, Yuri sips her drink and reflects on how long it has been since they've had such a peaceful morning, a luxury their journey never afforded. A gentle wind blows, carrying leaves across the serene landscape. The peaceful atmosphere settles over them on the terrace. Yuri sighs that peace is wonderful, and Jin agrees, adding that it's a relief not to be on guard. She understands, saying her own body feels lighter. He asks Yuri how she plans to spend her time now. She describes a simple, quiet life of tending fields, hunting, and fishing. She then turns the question back to him, asking about his plans. Before he can answer, she blurts out that she would like to have children, then immediately grows flustered and apologizes, claiming she bit her tongue. Her sudden declaration leaves Jin momentarily speechless. She clarifies her true meaning, asking if it wouldn't be wonderful to be able to just chat leisurely like this. A warm smile spreads across his face as he agrees that it would be. The thought then solidifies in his mind. If it were possible, he would want to spend his time with Yuri like this forever. Her soft giggle breaks his concentration as she asks what he is saying, hinting that he may have spoken his feelings aloud. He remains seated at the table as Yuri declares that since they are already getting married, they can spend forever together from now on. Her words transport her back to that day, a memory she has never forgotten for a moment. Jin, however, is completely lost, stammering in confusion. As she stammers, a deep blush spreads across her face. She is remembering what she considers to be the passionate proposal he gave her. She recalls the exact words he spoke when they first met. He had seen her suffering, on the verge of breaking, and promised he would be there to support her. That marriage vow, she explains with heartfelt emotion, was her salvation. At a time when she was tired of living and frightened by every prayer, his words were the light that shone upon her. Returning to the present, she agrees with her own sentiment, realizing she too needs to properly put her feelings into words. Jin can only watch, taken aback, as she becomes overwhelmed with emotion. Her expression hardens with resolve. Leaning in close, she looks him directly in the eye and makes her confession. She loves him, and she wants to live her life with him. Jin is stunned into silence. She continues, explaining that after being together for 3 years, she has seen so many of his expressions. She truly believed she knew him well. She can tell what he is thinking right now, but her thought is cut short by the creak of a nearby door. Ryoshika is there, peeking into the room with a knowing smile. She lunges forward, grabbing Jin by the arm and yanking him away from Yuri. Declaring that she doesn't want to lose, she pulls him off balance, sending them both tumbling to the ground as Yuri watches in shock. He lands heavily on top of her, his face pressed against her chest. The impact leaves him dazed and flustered. He immediately tries to push himself up, stammering an apology to Yuri and promising to move right away. But beneath him, Ryoshika's heart thumps loudly in her chest. She looks up at him and apologizes to Jin, insisting that despite appearances, this isn't what he thinks. Her heart continues to race as she gazes up at him, her expression shifting. She begins to admit that she is not a good girl. As Jin remains frozen above her, a determined look crosses her face. She makes a silent, fervent promise. She will make him utterly obsessed, so much so that he won't be able to live without her. On a wooden deck, Yuri lies atop Jin, her embrace trapping him. She confesses that she is not the simple, good girl he imagines her to be, promising to completely overwhelm him. She holds his head firmly, a blush on her cheeks, as she tells him he cannot escape her. His vision is completely obscured as his face is pressed against her. The rapid, loud beating of her heart and her sweet scent overwhelm his senses, making it difficult for him to think straight. He struggles against her grip, laughing nervously and begging her to let go. Realizing he is about to succumb to the temptation, he musters his strength and pushes away, breaking a piece of the wooden railing in his haste. He immediately apologizes to everyone for the commotion. The noise draws unwanted attention. From above, Reki Arias appears, her expression questioning as she asks what the two of them are doing outside. Her question hangs in the air as she takes in the compromising scene before her. Jin and Yuri sprawled on the deck floor. The two scramble to explain. Jin frantically insists that this isn't what it looks like, claiming he had just collapsed. Yuri quickly agrees, dismissing it all as a mere coincidence. Reki, however, remains silent and unconvinced. Standing up, Jin tries to smooth things over, stating that if nothing is going on, then everything is fine. Nearby, Ryoshika addresses Yuri, saying she has said what she needed to and will now leave the rest to Reki. As she turns to depart, announcing she's going for a walk, Jin calls out in surprise, asking her to wait. His attention, however, is immediately pulled back to Reki. He turns to face her, finding her expression cold and serious. He can only utter her name, the word hanging in the tense air between them. She lies on the bed next to Jin, remarking that it feels nostalgic, like they're kids again. He quietly agrees. Her comment is followed by a strained, quiet laugh, her eyes wide and unblinking. The silence that follows is heavy with unspoken tension. He realizes he should probably tell her about Yuri and Ryoshika becoming his companions, but the words won't come. The situation feels too awkward. Reki breaks the silence, suddenly admitting that she likes Yuri. She explains that because Yuri is fundamentally a kind person, it's hard to truly hate her. She continues, listing Yuri's other qualities. She's a good cook and even helped Reki with her studies. Jin can only agree. With a surprising frankness, she adds that Yuri's breasts are also bigger than hers. A flustered Jin once again finds himself agreeing. But as she begins her next thought, he suddenly realizes she's brought up a point he can't simply agree with. She turns to face him, her expression earnest and her cheeks flushed, declaring that her feelings for him won't lose to anyone. Her words strike him with the force of a physical blow, his heart pounding in his chest. He's stunned, wondering what she could possibly be thinking, going up against the hero. As he sits up, completely flustered, she snuggles into the bedding, murmuring how warm he is. The moment reminds him of the old days, when they would often sleep in the same bed, and she would sneak in to join him. He reminisced about their past, recalling how she used to cling to him, only to kick him out of bed by morning. Reki, however, seemed not to remember. He sat on the floor, a sense of resignation washing over him as he admitted he might not be able to match her anymore, realizing her hero's blessing was simply too strong. She turned to him, a confident glint in her eye, and declared that she could, of course, knock him down with just her pinky finger. The statement left him utterly shocked. When she suggested they arm wrestle again to prove it, he immediately declined. He would probably lose, he conceded, choosing to pass on the challenge. Her taunts came swiftly. She called him a weakling and a coward for running away. Goaded beyond his patience, he shot up, his pride stung. He accepted the challenge, shouting that he would do it with less than his pinky finger. She extended her pinky, a serious expression on her face as she warned him that he could get hurt. Despite his bravado, Jin looked nervous, telling her to come at him with everything she had. Their fingers interlocked, sealing the terms of the unusual duel. She gave him the go-ahead, telling him to start whenever he was ready. With a determined look, he confirmed he was. He lunged, putting his entire body weight into the effort with a great shout. Reki simply watched, a small, amused smile playing on her lips as she effortlessly held her ground. The force of his own pushback sent him flying across the room. As he tumbled through the air, Reki looked on fondly, remarking that it was cute how hard he was trying. He landed in a heap on the floor. Reki stood over him and calmly declared her victory. Utterly spent, Jin could only lie there and admit his complete and total defeat. He lay on the bed, still reeling from his swift defeat, as Reki's hand gently patted his head. Leaning over him, she tried to console him, explaining that battles weren't solely about strength and that he shouldn't lose confidence over a single loss. However, she added with a teasing smile, a loss was still a loss, and as punishment, he would have to submit to an interrogation. To begin her questioning, she moved over him, pinning his hand firmly to the bed and calling his name to get his full attention. Her interrogation began with a direct and startling question. Why wouldn't he sleep with her anymore? She reminded him that he used to during their journey, leaving Jin completely stunned by the inquiry. A deep blush spread across her face as she struggled to find the right words, stammering that it was because of something specific, though she couldn't quite bring herself to say it. He realized she must be embarrassed as well, his own discomfort growing as she held his hand. But she simply tightened her grip, interlacing their fingers and insisting that it was totally fine. Looking him directly in the eyes with a determined expression, she repeated her assurance, leaving no room for argument. With her resolve set, she made her request plain. She wanted them to start sleeping together again, starting that very day. The proposition left Jin utterly speechless and wide-eyed. He finally found his voice, stammering out a protest that a man and a woman shouldn't share a bed. His flustered objection sparked a sudden realization in Reki. Jin was finally conscious of her as a girl. A look of pure delight spread across her face at this revelation. Without another word, she settled into the bed beside him, ready to sleep. Her words sent his mind into a tailspin. How was he supposed to think of Reki now? He tried to cling to his old perception of her, that she had always been like a little sister. But Reki, smiling down at him with a hand on his head, immediately dismissed the notion. No, she said, that's not it. Her expression softened, a blush spreading across her cheeks as she looked at him with pure joy. I'm happy, she declared softly. Before he could process her words, she leaned in, her face just inches from his. Jin, she whispered, her finger gently touching his lips, and then she closed the remaining distance, pressing her lips against his. In that moment, his understanding of her was irrevocably changed. The kiss was brief, but its impact left Jin stunned. Reki pulled back slightly, her eyes shining with triumph. She clasped her hands together, overjoyed that it was finally happening, reminding him of his own words, that he saw her as a woman now, not as a little sister. He remained frozen, hand touching his cheek, unable to comprehend the sudden shift in their relationship. Reki, meanwhile, savored the moment, a relieved blush on her face. She had finally graduated from being just a little sister in his eyes. With her victory secured, she stood and turned back towards him as he cautiously moved off the bed. She declared that she would forgive him for now, because this new understanding meant she could finally stand beside him as an equal, not just follow behind. A quiet moment passed between them. As he sat on the edge of the bed and she stood before him, a simple, undeniable truth crystallized in his mind. He liked Reki. The silence was broken by the click of the door as Yuri entered, cheerfully announcing her return. The interruption did little to sway Jin's thoughts. He realized the problem wasn't his feelings, but how to act on them. Reki had tried so hard, pushing herself for his sake, and he knew he wanted to properly respond to her feelings. He was still processing the kiss when Ryashika's voice cut through the tension. She had returned, with Yuri at her side, and immediately announced her predicament. She confessed that 3 people had declared their feelings for her, yet she hadn't been able to give a single answer, leaving her in a complicated, half-hearted state with Reki. The sudden revelation hung heavy in the air. Her words immediately put Reki on the spot. The hero's face flushed a deep red as Yuri and Ryashika playfully yet pointedly questioned her, asking if she and the sage had crossed the line. Flustered, she vehemently told them to be quiet, trying to change the subject. Her reaction only amused Yuri and Ryashika, who laughed at the thought of the great hero being so innocent. As the teasing continued, Jin sat hunched over, completely overwhelmed by the turn of events. His turmoil was interrupted by Yuri, who cheerfully announced that the matter she'd been handling had gone well. In fact, she declared the wedding venue was now decided. Her declaration brought a sudden halt to the conversation. A wedding venue? The 3 women stood together, while Jin remained seated on the bed, the unexpected news adding another layer of confusion to the moment. He struggled to keep up with the rapidly escalating conversation. Forcing a strained smile, he managed to ask the most pressing question on his mind. Whose marriage was it? In response, Ryashika simply gestured towards the group with a knowing look, suggesting that the answer was perfectly obvious. The 3 women, Yuri, Reki, and Ryashika, stood together, each with a soft, expectant smile. Yuri began to clarify, stating it was for her, and for them, and for Jin. The realization struck him with the force of a physical blow. His wedding, with all 3 of them. The complicated situation had just escalated into a confirmed love triangle, or perhaps something more. Reki triumphantly announces that a wedding venue has been decided for the 3 of them and Jin. Ryashika questions if that isn't Jin's concern, but Reki dismisses the thought. Jin, utterly stunned, can only stammer in disbelief at the idea of marrying all 3. Ryashika calmly asks if she is wrong to want to accept the affection from all of them. The 4 of them are now seated at a table. Jin sits in the middle, hands clasped nervously, while Reki and Ryashika flank him. Yuri stands directly behind, her hands resting on his shoulders, creating an atmosphere of intense pressure. He leaps away from the table in a panic, demanding to know why they are all crowded on his side. Reki calmly replies that it is only natural to sit next to one's husband. Flustered, Jin declares he will move to the other side instead. As he moves, the 3 women instantly slide their chairs to the other side of the table to follow him. He shouts in exasperation for them not to just move over. His frustration gives way to a sudden, startling realization. From what Ryashika said, he understands that all 3 of them knew about each other's feelings for him all along. He looks at the 3 women, their expectant faces watching him. He steels himself, deciding that right now, he needs to face them directly. A memory washes over him of their confessions. They had all told him that they love him. He continues his internal monologue, believing that even if he were to say nothing, they would likely remain by his side forever. But he rejects that passive approach. Standing before them, he decides that simply letting things be is not an option. He looks at them with a newfound seriousness, asking if they will listen to what he has to say. He declares that he wants to have serious talk now. He begins to speak, recalling his conversation with Lusika the day before. Startled by his serious tone, she offers a gentle smile and asks why he is being so formal all of a sudden. His attention then shifts to Yuri. He explains that he must first apologize to her regarding the proposal they shared when they were younger, admitting that his words back then were not born from romantic feelings. Yuri looks up, surprised by the direct address. He immediately follows up, stating that he must apologize to Reki as well. He clarifies that he only just realized the promise she had mentioned at the end was the one they made as children, a pinky promise from long ago. Bowing his head deeply, he says, "I'm sorry." He confesses that he never imagined Reki would have held on to that memory all this time, as he had made the promise without giving it any real thought. He explains his past mindset, revealing that he lacked confidence in himself and felt unworthy of fighting alongside them. His greatest desire was simply to be able to proudly call himself their comrade. The memories surface of his departure, a lonely figure walking away. He admits that the thought of no longer sharing in their joys made leaving the party a deeply frustrating and lonely experience. He recalls the despair, the feeling that he could never reach them again, symbolized by the image of his empty room. But his tone shifts. He explains that even after the battles ended, they all remained by his side. Spending time with them outside the context of the hero's party made him realize something crucial. Overwhelmed by this realization, he falls to his knees. With tears in his eyes, he declares his true desire. From now on, and forever, he wants to keep living with all of them. He bowed deeply before them, his voice thick with emotion as he addressed each woman by name. Yuri, Lusika, and Reki. He vowed to make them all happy, then made his plea, "Please marry me." The 3 women stood in stunned silence, their faces flushed with a mix of shock and joy. His fist tightened as he considered the weight of his words. The truth was simple. He couldn't bring himself to choose just one of them. He knew there would be complications. He didn't even know if the country would accept such a union. But he pushed those worries aside, determined to figure it all out later. His resolve was fueled by a single, overwhelming feeling that encompassed all 3 women. who now looked on with gentle, accepting smiles. He loved them all so much, and so, with a blush spreading across his face, he made his heartfelt proposal official, his voice ringing with conviction. Please let me marry all of you. Inside a modest room, a fire crackles softly in the hearth. Jin sits on the floor, head bowed in contemplation, while Reki, Ryashika, and Yuri stand together, observing him in silence. The quiet is shattered by laughter. Reki, Ryashika, and Yuri all try to stifle their giggles, much to Jin's shrunken, mortified confusion. As the women laugh, Yuri apologizes cheerfully. She remarks that despite his serious expression, she finds him indecisive. Utterly bewildered, Jin asks why everyone is laughing. He is met not with an answer, but with a gentle hand on his shoulder. Reki looks at him kindly and explains that they've known all along that he can't choose just one of them. Her gaze intensifies, filled with a confident resolve. She tells him not to underestimate the 10 years she has spent loving him. His eyes widen, a blush spreading across his face as her declaration sinks in. Before he can fully process her words, Reki pulls him into a tight embrace. She exclaims that it's settled then, but adds that it's terrible he misread her feelings for so long, admitting she's quite ashamed. She holds him tighter, telling him he should hold his head higher. She reminisces about how happy she was when she joined their journey, knowing it meant she could stay by his side. Her voice softens as she confesses that he has always been the one to bring warmth to her heart. As her confession hangs in the air, Yuri adds that Jin's words lifted her own heart, and that she was able to come this far because of him. Ryashika agrees, saying she feels the same, and gently asks Jin to raise his head. Overwhelmed, Jin can only kneel, his head bowed before them. He felt their hands gently close over his, as Ryashika spoke for all of them. Their answer, she explained, had been decided from the very day they each fell in love with him. In a single, joyous motion, they all moved in, embracing him warmly. Yuri from his left, Reki from his right, and Ryashika holding his hand, they all gave their answer with beaming smiles. Yes, gladly. The weight of his anxiety and the overwhelming relief of their acceptance broke through his composure. Tears streamed down his face as he sobbed out his gratitude, repeating the words, "Thank you," over and over again. His tears soaked the shoulder of Reki's attire, prompting her to playfully complain that he was getting her all soggy. Still blushing and emotional, he managed a quiet apology. Yuri noted with a gentle smile that this was the first time she had ever seen him cry, while Ryashika added that he was finally showing them his vulnerable side. Wiping his eyes, he admitted that of course he would cry when he was this mood. Reki, however, couldn't resist a light-hearted jab, remarking on how unusually sulky he normally is. Jin could only offer a flustered anyway. In response, gathering himself, his expression shifted to one of fierce determination. He clenched his fist and declared that from now on, he would do his absolute best so that the four of them could be happy together, asking them to please watch over him. His heartfelt vow was met with radiant, tearful smiles. Together, Ryashika, Reki, and Yuri gave their enthusiastic and unified consent with a resounding yes. However, Reki then added that he didn't need to worry about that. The sudden cryptic statement left him completely bewildered, prompting a confused huh. Ryashika leaned in to clarify, reminding him that she had already mentioned the wedding venue was decided. As Reki made a playful gesture, Ryashika announced their destination, the royal castle. The revelation struck Jin with such force that his jaw dropped in utter shock. He reels back, his voice cracking with disbelief. The royal castle? He demands to know what they're suddenly talking about, completely blindsided by the announcement. As he stares in stunned silence, Reki begins to explain that this is precisely why he will have to do something. Before she can finish her thought, Ryashika interjects, clarifying that under normal circumstances, such a thing would be out of the question. With a confident smile, Reki delivers the final, shocking piece of their plan. Jin must become a noble. The combined power of the three women is enough to move the entire nation to their will. Down below, Jin can only let out a stupefied sound, utterly overwhelmed by the revelation. Within the royal capital of the Mian Kingdom, inside Eldentur Castle, a difficult reality is contemplated. For a mere commoner to marry a hero is socially unacceptable. Furthermore, polygamy with a sage and a saint is considered absolutely out of the question. As a royal guard commands silence, a single path forward becomes clear. The only way is to become a noble. As this thought solidifies, an announcer's voice echoes through the grand hall, heralding the arrival of His Majesty the King. Olvult Mion, the king of the Mian Kingdom, makes his entrance, his expression stern and regal. Now in the throne room, Reki explains that they have come to offer greetings regarding Jin Geist's safe return to His Majesty Olvult. Jin, however, is sweating, completely overwhelmed by the situation. He can't believe how fast everything is moving. Kneeling before the throne, Reki formally apologizes for the impudence of requesting such a sudden audience. A powerful voice cuts through the formality, snapping with authority as the king commands them to raise their faces. The king suddenly rushes forward, enveloping Jin in a tight, emotional embrace. He cries out Jin's name, exclaiming with joy that he has truly done well. Jin is utterly shocked by the display. He recognizes the man hugging him as the current king of the Mian Kingdom. The king affectionately calls him his beloved grandson of the heart, expressing how good it is to see him return safely. He continues to cling to Jin, prompting Reki and Ryashika to intervene. Reki tells the king not to cling to their husband so much, while Ryashika complains that his old age smell will transfer. As Jin tries to calm them down, noting they only just returned, the king covers his face in weary exasperation. Jin explains that arranging the audience wasn't troublesome, as he can travel back and forth quickly with Ryashika's transfer magic, though he is warned not to abuse the ability. The Mian Kingdom is where this new chapter of their journey begins. The Mian Kingdom is one of the great nations that divides the continent. It maintains a strong monarchy, but governs with an emphasis on autonomy, a policy that has earned it the deep trust of its citizens. This trust is built on a foundation of support. The hero's journey has always been premised on the nation's backing, providing supplies, funding, and invaluable opportunities to learn swordsmanship and magic. King Ulvold is a figure of great renown, praised across the lands for his ability to mediate between races and nations that once shared only ambiguous and tense relationships. His influence was such that even individuals from historically complex origins, like Ryashika from the Elf Village and Yuri of the Holy Church, were able to form a party together. It was also by the king's grace, Jin reflected, that a mere commoner like himself could accompany the hero's party. He recalled the king's words, explaining that the hero, Reki, needed someone to support her heart. He remembered the king's gentle but firm guidance, telling him to walk with her for now, but giving him leave to stop if he ever felt he'd reached his limit. Nearby, Reki had overheard, her hand tightening on her sword as she realized the king truly understood the immense pressure weighing upon her. Returning to the present, the king addressed them all, correctly surmising that their visit concerned their collective feelings for Jin. He acknowledged that their emotions made him very happy, and that he understood they all seriously wished to be married. Jin, however, looked away, the thought of becoming a noble feeling like a distant, unattainable dream. He then turned his attention to the three women, stroking his beard thoughtfully. He asked them directly if they had properly explained everything to Jin. Their reaction was less than clear. Ryashika muttered the word fool, while Reki and Yuri looked utterly lost, their expressions filled with confusion. Yuri then began to explain their reasoning. She recounted how they had all sensed each other's feelings for Jin and recognized them as precious sentiments they couldn't yield to one another. She added that because Jin is so serious, he thinks things through properly, but left the thought unfinished. The unspoken truth was that their rivalry, if unchecked, would be catastrophic. They all understood that if they were to fight seriously over him, the resulting damage would be tremendous, far beyond what even the main army could handle. Reki grimly acknowledged that this was probably true, and so, having discussed the matter, they had arrived at a single, logical conclusion. Ryashika, taking on the role of an instructor, explained their plan. For everyone to be happy, a prerequisite had to be met. She pointed to a diagram of the social hierarchy, noting that polygamy is recognized according to rank, being permissible for nobles and royalty. Therefore, Jin becoming a noble was the only path forward. She, along with her companions, declared that nothing now stood in the way of their marriage. They told Jin he could no longer escape, and that he should prepare himself. The three women embraced each other joyfully, affectionately calling him their darling. He looked on, blushing, as the realization struck him. While he had been oblivious, every one of them had been thinking so deeply on his behalf. He turned his attention to the king, acknowledging that he understood everyone's feelings and the necessity of becoming a noble. However, he voiced his doubt, questioning if such a thing was truly possible without some great achievement in war or research. King Ulvold confirmed his suspicion, stating that was exactly right. Such an achievement was worthy of bestowing honors. But before the weight of that requirement could settle, Yuri gently reminded him of a fact he seemed to have forgotten. They had already defeated the Demon King. He was taken aback by their confidence, humbly thanking His Majesty for even suggesting it. Still, a deep-seated doubt remained. His hesitation stemmed from a painful memory. He considered the victory to be Reki and Yuri's achievement alone. In his mind, he had failed, having left the party at the very end, unable to even fight together with them in the final battle. Sensing the young man's inner turmoil, King Ulvold spoke with gravity. He commanded Jin to listen well, assuring him that there were many who recognized his efforts. He explained the immense hope the hero's party's advance brought to a world pressed by the demon race, emphasizing that Jin's contributions were an integral part of that hope. The king acknowledged that the three women had surely told him this many times, but he would state it again for good measure. Jin was proof that he was a necessary companion for their journey. The conversation culminated in a formal ceremony within the grand throne room. Flanked by guards, Jin Geist stood before the throne with his three companions as King Ulvold addressed him directly, his voice echoing through the hall. The king declared that his service had been truly magnificent. Placing a hand on the young man's shoulder, the king made a solemn vow. He would support the marriage in the royal capital with the full backing of the nation. Overwhelmed, Jin could only offer his heartfelt thanks. But this was still only the beginning. He found himself at a celebratory gathering where his father, beaming with pride, raises a mug high into the air. The man enthusiastically proposes a toast to Baron Jin Geist, prompting Jin to quietly remark that he's getting ahead of himself. Reki, Ryashika, and Yuri all join in the toast, their faces bright with joy. Amidst the feast laid out before them, Ryashika notes that with this, their relationship is now officially recognized by the state. Reki quickly adds the clarification that, for the time being, the matter is still unofficial. His mother explains the delay, noting that the country is swamped with things to do and that His Majesty looked quite tired. She says they simply need to wait for good fortune. Regardless, she is overjoyed that Jin has brought home a bride. At the mention of the word, Reki, Ryashika, and Yuri all blush deeply, creating a sight that leaves Jin and his father momentarily speechless. The three women begin to share their own feelings on the matter. Reki states plainly that she has always intended to marry Jin. Ryashika admits she never thought the day would come when she could wear a white kimono, while Yuri confesses that she has always dreamed of holding a ceremony at the royal castle. Jin's mother then turns to Reki, telling her she's glad she made a new friend and asking her to please take care of her son. With a piece of meat in hand, Reki simply agrees. She thanks the older woman, then pauses, asking if perhaps she should call her mother-in-law now. Immediately, Ryashika and Yuri follow her lead, praising the deliciousness of the soup and addressing her as mother-in-law as well. Watching the scene, Jin's father claps him on the back, declaring that the girls are too good for him. Later that evening, Jin and his father stand together under the stars. His father speaks, remarking that this is the moment for Jin to show what kind of man he is. He admits that he initially thought he might have to give Jin a knock on the head. He reminds his son that he left the village vowing to protect Reki, but then couldn't return with her. The thought had weighed on him, and he confesses he would be lying if he said he hadn't considered it. But his father continues that all changed when he saw Jin's expression upon his return. In that moment, he realized that his son had made many choices in his own way, navigating a difficult path. He concludes that Jin has, in fact, been recognized by his companions and is clearly well-liked by them. Looking over at the three women, he takes a drink from his mug and declares with a grin what a lucky guy his son is. Touched by the words, Jin can only murmur, "Father." He sits with his father by the fire, sharing a drink. His father encourages him to have more, noting he's old enough now. Jin agrees, but admits that something feels strange. Later, holding a mug, he reflects on his feelings. Until that morning, he was filled with anxiety and tension about the upcoming wedding ceremony. But now, his heart pounds with excitement, imagining being blessed by so many people. This thought leads to a sudden complication. He turns to his three fiancées, realizing that since it's a polygamous marriage, he has no idea in what order they are supposed to enter. The question hangs in the air, catching all three women by surprise. Reki, however, breaks the silence with a coy smile, teasingly telling Jin that he makes funny jokes. Ryashika follows, her eyes closed in serene confidence, as she brings up the matter of who is most suitable to be first. And Yuri, blushing happily, adds that if they consider their achievements, the answer should be obvious. In perfect competitive unison, all three women stake their claim, "It has to be me." Jin can only stare, dumbfounded, as the friendly atmosphere evaporates, replaced by a tense rivalry. The narrative shifts, recalling the events around that time at the Demon Lord's castle, where the four heroes once fought together as a single, powerful unit. Inside that very castle, the demon princess Hina storms in, confronting her father. She demands to know what he means by his recent actions, exclaiming that the outside world has become strange and questioning what has happened to the demon race's mission. The former demon lord, Raluel, looks at her calmly. He dismisses her concerns entirely. World conquest by the demon race, he declares, is ancient history. He tells his stunned daughter that they should now join hands with humans and coexist. She reeled from her father's words, unable to comprehend his desire for coexistence. In her mind, this was all the hero's fault. She wondered where the brave, fierce, and evil father she once knew had gone. Her thoughts spiraled. She had heard that her father had become strange, too kind, after being bathed in so-called holy power. It was after the heroes appeared that the demon race, which had held the advantage for so long, began to crumble. Returning to the present, she stood silently before him. Her father, Kaiser Raluel, smiled warmly, suggesting they clean the castle together. With a quiet resolve, Hina simply replied, "Yes, father," her mind now made up. Her true intention burned within her. She vowed to defeat the heroes and, at all costs, bring back the cruel and tyrannical father she revered. With a final determined glance, she shattered a nearby window and launched herself into the open air. As she disappeared, Kaiser Raluel remained calm. He called for his aide, Pararuka, who appeared instantly, confirming he already knew Hina's destination. The former demon lord then turned to another subordinate, a woman with glasses, entrusting her with a task due to her expertise on humans. She simply asked where it was. Meanwhile, Hina soared through the sky at incredible speed, her destination clear, the royal capital. Her voice carried on the wind, a promise and a threat. "Wait for me, heroes." Her eyes blazed with fury as she pictured her targets, Jin and his companions. With absolute conviction, she roared her intent to the heavens. "I will definitely plunge you into terror." Several days after the audience with the king, a hooded figure arrives in the bustling capital. Observing the crowds, she quietly notes that this is indeed the royal city. The figure, Princess Hina, grits her teeth in frustration. She has finally arrived, but finds the sheer number of what she considers weak humans to be utterly galling. She knows that while it would be easy to cause a scene, she cannot reveal her true identity yet. Not until she gets her hands on a certain something. Her resolve hardens as she moves through the city. Meanwhile, at Jin Geist's home, he makes a sudden announcement to Reki, Yuri, and Ryashika. He thinks they should build a house. His companions are taken aback by the abrupt proposal. Yuri asks why he's bringing this up now, and a distressed Reki clenches her fist, declaring that it's simply impossible. The reason for her outburst is clear: the memory of their current, cramped living situation. All of them sleep in the same room, a fact made all the more awkward by Jin's father repeatedly witnessing the scene. Back in the present, Reki points an accusing finger at Yuri, complaining that she's always coming into their room and sold her out. Yuri calmly replies that they're all friends and should just get along. Ryashika sighs in exasperation, telling the two to stop being so noisy. Yuri, however, seems to imply that Ryashika is also part of the problem. Suddenly, Reki changes her tune, declaring that she agrees and that a love nest is necessary, leaving no room for objections. Ryashika immediately takes charge, telling Jin to leave the design to her while he handles the layout and budget, adding that she'll be relying on him. She then gets ahead of herself, asking how many children's rooms they should plan for. As Reki and Yuri dream of a large room for two, a horrified Jin swallows hard and demands she retract her statement. He listens as Ryashika's planning escalates. She declares that since they'll all be a family, they should bathe together, adding that she'll prepare a special playroom. The thought makes her feel flushed. A flustered Yuri, waving her hands in protest, demands to know why the discussion has suddenly turned so loose. Deciding he's had enough, he pulls Reki close and announces they're heading outside. He remarks that Ryashika's gentle nature is causing her to act strangely, but Ryashika protests, wanting him to stay and be pampered. With a determined look, Jin leads Reki away from the escalating chaos. They find a peaceful spot under a large tree. As Jin sips from a mug, he comments on how delicious the tea is. He then turns to Reki, who is resting against him, and asks if she'd like some. Noticing she seems warm, he gently blows on her forehead to cool her down. She looks up at him, admitting she's been waiting for a quiet moment like this for a long time. With a hopeful expression, she asks if he would re-braid her hair. He smiles and readily agrees. Leaning against him with her eyes closed, Reki quietly confesses that she wants him to pamper her a lot. As a gentle breeze rustles the leaves of the tree above them, he finishes his task. All done, he announces softly. She turns around, her hair now neatly braided. He tells her she looks cute, and she agrees. Then, with a radiant smile, she declares that she has now become the cutest girl in the entire world, which makes him blush. Overcome with affection, he embraces her from behind. He tells her that from now on, she can be pampered to her heart's content, day and night. Reki closes her eyes happily, whispering that they don't have to hold back anymore. Her eyes widen slightly, surprised by his forwardness. He smiles gently and confesses that this is what he had wanted to do with her all along. Hearing his confession, a look of pure bliss spreads across her face. She thinks to herself that it's rare to see Jin be so proactive, but she loves it. In his arms, she feels utterly happy. She was utterly flustered, insisting that their private moment had only gone so far and no further. Her outburst was directed at Yuri and Ryashika, who had apparently detected the intimate waves emanating from her and Jin. Reki vehemently forbade any lewd thoughts, while Yuri pointed out they had been working hard in the meantime. Ryashika, however, was more curious about the nature of the waves, as Jin lamented that he and Reki had perhaps been a little too obvious. He turned his attention back to the task at hand, presenting the house blueprints to Ryashika. He praised her design, but she deflected the compliment, marveling at how quickly he had managed to create such a grand plan. She assured him that with her abilities, the need for manual labor would be a non-issue. To demonstrate her point, Ryashika began a summoning. With a surge of power, a massive skeletal creature materialized before them, an undead dragon. The creature was not a mindless beast. Ryashika explained that it possessed the intelligence to comprehend complex instructions, making it the ideal laborer for their construction project. As she spoke, Reki suddenly latched onto Jin's arm, startling him. Ryashika continued, adding that she also possessed all the necessary qualities of a good wife. Reki, tightening her grip, declared that supporting one's husband was the role of a proper wife, staking her claim. The declaration hung in the air, a silent challenge. Yuri, Reki, and Ryashika each wore an expression of unwavering, competitive resolve. Overwhelmed by the sudden tension, Jin raised his hand to cut through it, deciding to move things along. But as he prepared to give the order, Reki grabbed his sleeve, her eyes wide with determination, insisting that she be included. She blushed furiously, her mind racing with the thought that Jin's first duty should be to cook for her, and that she would have to give her absolute best to earn it. Watching her, Jin simply smiled, flanked by a knowing Ryashika and Yuri, and gently advised her not to push herself too hard.